The national interest is one of the things that is being argued by a lot of folks because when I asked you at the beginning of our conversation about the environmental impact and so on, I'm glad that you walked into that area because many folks are saying with the diversification that we need right now, tourism is a source of income. There is a possibility this can in fact prove to be more beneficial compared to what we could lose. And as such, that will weigh a little heavy on those who are opposed to your view that we should not be giving up this land. Or is it, and let me ask you to clarify here, is it your view that we should not give up this land for that purpose, or we should have transparency before we give it up?
We should have transparency. Let me be very clear. I'm not against development. I mean, I'm part of the development industry. Every development that takes place, it's further contracts and further opportunities for myself and colleagues and so on. So there's no hostility to development. Having said that, if you bear in mind the precepts of proper urban and regional planning, medium and long term thinking, and the role of our limited land space in the country going forward, we need to be conscious of what it is we're doing and why it is we're doing it. We can't proceed in the same old way. What we've always said about Invaders Bay is that Invaders Bay is quite simply the largest development into a single block of land in living memory to be developed in our capital city. And it may have been acceptable 75 years ago, 85 years ago, to develop a big block of land like Woodbrook. And nobody actually had any details of what was happening and so on, because that's around the time that all around here was developed. Okay, that was acceptable. But in today's norm, and you see times change and so do we, and we refers to the society. In today's world, we expect to be consulted, and we expect to be considered in this defining phrase, which is in his 17th recommendation of the Afra report. The defining phrase is before decisions are taken. We don't want to be consulted after you already decided about A, B, and C, and you're just telling us to say you had a consultation.
It is for that reason.
We want to be part of the conversation. This is a republic. This is a democracy. We want to be part of the conversation from the beginning, so that we can understand what's happening in our country. And who is to tell whether, in fact, a better quality of decision-making may not emerge from a participative process?
You know, it is from that level that it becomes more disquieting to me because we know of the objections that were raised before the elections.
Yes.
And we would think that there would be some remedial or corrective measures being put in place. But from what you said, your interpretation of what the Minister of Finance meant in his statement, you were saying that you having status quo here? Is that
well? It seems so. What we're unknown? You said there's some unknown things. That to be quite fair here.
Because you mentioned sidestepping, which if you're sidestepping, you're doing the same thing that obtained before.
Yes. To be fair, Rennie, what we don't know. For example, some of the things we don't know. We talked about A, which is the Streets of the World proposal. We talked about B, the Marina proposal. And then I just read out for listeners the statement made by Minister Imbut with relation to C, which is the International Financial Center and a convention center and a hotel and so on and so on. Now, the whole thing is 70 acres, eh? Mr. Streets of the World is on about 10.3 acres. The Invaders Bay Marina is about 13.5 acres, which leaves about 40 to 45 acres undeveloped. Is that 40 to 45 acres going to be occupied by this project? In other words, will this project that Minister Imbut read out displace the first two? In other words, the approvals granted by the People's Partnership, have those been extinguished? Or are those projects proceeding? Is this project Minister Imbut spoke about in replacement of those or in addition to those? These are really fundamental questions we don't know. Can we get a map to show us where is A, B, and C? Can we start a participative process? Because without meaning to get into, our country is this big. And I'm holding it here so the camera could see it. Our country is this big. And I don't like to get into a situation. And it pains me when I hear people speak about a north-south divide and south of the border, and we all use that sort of lingo in our thing, and some people don't. The only thing some people know after the lighthouse is the airport, and we all use that kind of lingo about each other. And it pains me to have this discussion. I myself use the lingo. I live here, I grew up here, and so. But what I want to say is this. Our country is this big, and we are now at a stage approaching a very urgent set of decisions. We now have to get over some of the bad habits and take up some of the good ways. The point I want to make about this small and about the north-south divide is that throughout the People's Partnership, one of the most vexatious issues arising around Invaders Bay was what I call the south of the border issue. So you had this major property in Port of Spain carded for development, and development appeared to be proceeding at full speed with support from the cabinet of the People's Partnership, and without regard what seemed to us to proper regard to the law and proper regard to consulting the public. In San Fernando, we have disused waterfront lands in the center of the city called King's Wharf. King's Wharf has been the subject of a significant amount of consultation. Proposals that we put up. And you know what is so ironic and vexing about the thing? I have been invited to the consultations for King's Wharf. I've had emails come to me from the Town and Country Planning Division. From the said Minister Tiwari's office. Dear Mr. Raymond, we're having a consultation next Tuesday at 6 o'clock at the library and at the City Hall and at this and at that. And they're having meetings and they're having discussions about what they're planning to do. Not a brick has been laid. And there's a substantial discussion that has gone on about what do we do with King's Wharf to revitalize the city of San Fernando. And I am saying, if it's good enough for San Fernando, it's good enough for Port of Spain. Yes. And whatever the people in San Fernando are drinking, bartender, I'll have one of those too. I'm a Port of Spain person. I grew up in San Fernando. But what's good enough for San Fernando is good enough for Port of Spain. We want a proper consultation before any decisions are taken on Invaders Bay.
Afra Raymond, you can go to his page. You can go to his website and find out all that he's tracing. Then there's a whole lot to keep you occupied. The Minister of Finance is no stranger to you in the CLICO situation. You had discussions with him. At this time, you were saying, and I bring him in because on the one hand, I was about to ask you, have you had discussions with the Trade and Industry Minister Paula Rupi-Skoon? But because, as you said, Minister Imbert articulated some areas that seem to link with this, I wanted to ask, have you had any discussion as to this Invaders Bay situation with him?
No, Minister Imbert and I have had discussions around CL Financial only. We haven't discussed Invaders Bay.
All right.
We are not at all. He hasn't tried to, I haven't tried to. We didn't. We were very focused when we had our meetings.
All right, let us see CF financing. Let's talk about that. Anything new on the horizon on this issue?
Well, we go to court tomorrow morning to the appeal court, and from what I could see, I think we will be asking for a further extension of time. There has been some movement. I would describe it. I don't want to say the details of it because it's a delicate stage of things. But I have been in discussions myself and my attorneys with Mr. Imbert and his attorneys, Minister Imbert and his attorneys, and there's been some movement. I would describe it as positive, coming from the state side. It isn't all that we wanted, but it's positive, and we have to consider it carefully and see how we go forward.
All right,
so there's been something positive. I don't want to say more on the air about what is and what is not the case, but it's positive, and we're in discussion.
Well, the court must always be a last resort, in my view, and if something can be done, that's
dialogue,
good. Yes,
constructive dialogue is starting.
Talking about dialogue, 25 minutes after 11 o'clock, the Attorney General on March 9th, I'm going to take you into another area because transparency is your business. Transparency is what we ask for the nation. The Attorney General on March 9th got the attention of the opposition and the nation when, in his contribution to the debate on SSA, spoke of investigations underway mandated by international monitoring agreements that include disclosure and of equitable interest and equitable ownership, a.k.a. those who have interest in other people's names, whether it be family members or they have different ways they have disposed of or hidden and or redirected their assets. As an advocate yourself who has seen the excesses of CLICO, are you heartened by this direction?
Well, I think it's important. I think it's an important step, a correct step in terms of calling for international cooperation in finding out whether any of Trinidad and Tobago's fundamental interests were compromised by the revelations in the Panama Papers. I would say that if I could put a couple of clear points forward. You see, we have all the time, Rennie, in this matter, we dance between 2 points, and our national dance is limbo. Where we try to get under the stick and dance gracefully to the other side of the dance floor, and we all the time without your back touching the ground. And it's like a kind of metaphor about the kind of society we live in. So at one level, and I would have to say it's the lower level, we have the question of what is legally acceptable. And a level above that, and it varies according to who you're speaking with and what day of the week and what time of night it is, there's the question about what's ethically and morally acceptable.
And what interests to protect.
Yes.
Yes.
So, for example, it is not illegal to own an offshore company. It's not illegal for me to have interest in 10 companies that are registered in other parts of the world in other people's names. There's nothing illegal about it. What it does, it raises a question ethically. If you and somebody are married or you and somebody are in business together and you discover that your business partner, who you thought was drawing the same amount of money as you out of the business, has in fact got 10 companies in Panama. Well, what was he really up to? He never told you. What was he really up to? His name is on the Panama list. So it raises an ethical and moral dimension. So you may not be able to sue the person, but it does raise a question.
Which was part of the discussion we had here on the question of because the name surfaces does not necessarily mean there is something illegal. However, it does raise a flag. Yes.
And therefore, what we have to be discussing, to me, if we want to have a fruitful discussion around this question, it's not just merely the question of where the legal line lies, but in fact, that space between. And where do we want our public officials to function? Where do we want those people who feed off of public money to function? So, for example, we have a procurement law, which is to be implemented shortly. We have a situation in which we understand that the procurement law is imperfect and there are areas for refinement. One area for refinement I would suggest is that there shouldn't be any situation where the ultimate beneficial ownership of a company is concealed and that company in any way qualifies to transact in public money. No way. If you and your uncle want to do that to each other, fine. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, the state of Trinidad and Tobago, our taxpayers' dollars, the money in the central bank is not for that. And we need to send a clear signal about that. Certainly, it needs to form part of the parliamentary code. It needs to form part of the code of conduct under the Integrity Commission. It needs to form part of the code coming out of the central bank in terms of what we call fit and proper. We need to set a line ethically and morally. We need to draw a line in the sand. And I'm saying this, I hope the Honorable Attorney General is somehow able either to hear this himself or to pick it up from his sources and so on. I'm saying we need to draw a line beyond the legal line. For too long in our country, we have been beset by attorneys and various attorneys general who are very much cognizant of the legal line and intermittently aware of the moral and ethical line. And I'm saying we need to set a moral and ethical bar by revising the fit and proper, by revising what are the proper guidelines for people to be companies directors under the state enterprises. If you're a company's director in the state enterprises and you're involved in a shadow company, you are out. The professional bodies need to do that too. And in fact, we need to make the point that that type of conduct is consistent with tax evasion, it is consistent with fraud, it is consistent with money laundering. It is not necessarily illegal, but because it is consistent with those things, no ethical and proper person would behave in that fashion. The challenge is before us now to draw a new line in the sand, to set a direction out of this morass.
Whether it is disclosure today or your good self, we have made it our business to bring in folks like you, because I think the first thing we have to do is de-blur the lines.
Yes.
Those folks, are the 2 lines. Yes, folks like to blur the lines because it makes it easy, de-blurring the lines. CF Financial, for instance, they were private until we decided we had to bail them out, and it became our interest.
Yes.
So are you optimistic? Are you, optimistic I think is a good word, that this heightened surveillance will in fact shed any new light on the CF situation that hitherto we weren't able to get to?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Because you've asked the question over and over. Where is the money going? Who's being paid?
This is really
What's being
done? Rennie, at one point, I can remember musing with some friends of mine. Just musing. I never wrote this down. I'm just going to say something now for the first time. Over some alcohol, no doubt. And saying
Not
to
this
them,
morning.
Not this morning. Some other time. Some other time sitting down on the balcony, relaxing with friends. And saying to them, you know, the way this thing looks. And by this thing, I mean this thing without a name that we call the CL Financial fiasco. The way this thing looks, I wouldn't be surprised if there was an Alan Stanford type element in the thing. And there's some kind of undercover banking, money laundering, some kind of funny thing. It's just the figures just don't make any sense. And the kind of opacity, the continued opacity that we can't get the answers. So you're making an important point, Rennie. It could be that this is a moment when we get to see a lot more than we normally would.
Because I'm looking
what
at
is a mysterious situation.
Yes.
Yeah? It could be that could be what is before us.